just find the really interesting stories that came out of this.
I heard
Jews
part one was very interesting.
and Jews in the Civil War. You know, and I also gave a disclaimer last time, which I will repeat today, that I'm not a historical revisionist. I did have a lot of Confederates because just because they turned out to have the really interesting stories, you know, but not that I'm, you know, supporting their philosophy, okay, which was very wrong. And, you know, I think we all accept that. Yeah, so I'm kind of starting from the middle here. And of course, you know, after I show slides, please unmute people so they can ask questions if they have them. But this first slide that I'm going to show here, this is actually a short clip from the film Gettysburg from 1993. I'm just going to set up the clip a little bit. You can probably all see my cursor. This is actor Jeff Bridges here, and he is playing
Can I call you back?
a hero of the.
I will talk to you then, okay?
Oh, yeah, yeah, please mute yourselves. Please mute yourselves, you know, while we're showing slides. This is the character is Joshua Chamberlain, who was a mild-mannered professor of classical studies in Maine and was one of the heroes of Gettysburg. He was a colonel and he led a bayonet charge down a place called Little Round Top at the Confederates. And this clip is, he's walking along with his younger brother, who I'm not sure is just a character that was created for the film or really was with him at the battle. But his younger brother here in the film is one of his staff officers walking along with his brother, and he's about to interview some Confederate prisoners. So I'm going to start the clip.
Hello, man. What outfit you with?
Archer's Brigade, Heath Division.
Where you from?
Tennessee. How about you?
Maine. I never been to Tennessee.
Reckon I never been to Maine neither.
I don't mean no disrespect to you fighting man. Sometimes I can't help but figure, why are you fighting this war?
Why are you fighting it?
Want to free the slaves, of course. Preserve the Union.
I don't know about some other folk, but I ain't fighting for no darkies one way or the other. I'm fighting for my rats. All of us here, that's what we're fighting for.
For your what?
For our rats. Why is it you folks just can't live the way you want to live? And let us live the way we do? Live and let live, I heard some folks say. Be a mite less fuss and bother if more folks took it to heart.
Where'd you get captured?
Railroad cut just west of Gettysburg town. Wasn't a pretty sight. Me and a good boy lost a young and promising life. Some were blue, some were gray. Seen enough of this war?
I guess I have.
I guess I have too. It looks like I'm gonna be sitting out the rest of it.
Well, I appreciate you talking to me.
See you in hell, Billy Yank.
See you in hell, Johnny Reb.
Okay. Could we unmute people for a minute? Ruth Ann?
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah, because I want to let people ask questions or talk a little bit. And of course, this little clip brings up a very problematic concept that is often repeated by the Confederate revisionists, that they weren't fighting for slavery one way or the other. It was all about rights, state rights. And that has
Yes.
been caught on to. It's
Yeah. People are going to have to unmute
yeah.
themselves.
Oh, okay. Okay, folks, if you want to say something, you could unmute yourselves. Any questions?
Oh, no, we came in late. I finally found.
Oh,
Can you see us?
yes, I can.
Yes.
I
I
can,
can
Marilyn.
see
I
you,
can
but
see
I-
you.
But I can't. Oh, here's gallery view. Is that what I want?
Do you know what? I would recommend not gallery view. I would recommend the little icon of two things stacked one on top of another.
Yeah.
And that'll occlude the screen a little bit less. It'll compete less with the program itself.
I don't see where you're looking, but I don't want to take your time. So
Oh, okay. No, you'll find it. You'll find it. There are different views that you can do for, the participant. But anyway, this was just Marilyn. This was just a short clip of a real character from Gettysburg, who is Joshua Chamberlain, who was one of the heroes, Union heroes of Gettysburg. And his younger brother is interviewing these Confederate prisoners who just said that they were, they don't care one way or another about slavery. They're fighting for rights, their rights. And I'm going to be talking about some Jewish Confederate prisoners of war in a few moments. But anyway, we can go along to the next slide here. Let me see what happens when I click. Oh, here we go. Yeah. And I was wondering when I saw this clip on YouTube, I borrowed liberally from YouTube for my whole presentation. There is a famous photograph of Matthew Brady, who was the big photographer, of the Civil War, of 3 Confederate prisoners. And this is a stereo, I think they called it stereopticon card from like early 1900s of this photograph.
Yes, it is stereopticon.
Yeah, it was the predecessor of this little thing I had as a kid, Master View or something like
yes.
that.
I had one too.
Where
View
you
Master.
could see stereo pictures, but that there was this very popular Victorian parlor thing that, you had these cards and you had a little tin thing. I've got one of them, it's an antique, and you put the card and you can see stereo views, in black and white of all sorts of pictures. So I was wondering if maybe the inspiration for that scene was this old photograph of the 3 Confederate prisoners, because there were 3 Confederate prisoners in the in that clip too. Yeah, so we're just going to move on a little bit, talk a little bit about the Jewish Confederate prisoners. Actually, the Confederates who were captured at the Battle of Gettysburg went to a not very nice place in New Jersey. Now, you might say no place in New Jersey is very nice, especially those of you from New York, but this is,
Don't talk about the Garden State. That's their slogan.
yeah. But this was a especially not very nice place in New Jersey. It was called Fort Delaware. It was a little island, technically just off the coast of New Jersey in the Delaware River, which operated as a prisoner of war camp. It was a military installation. I think it was continued to be a military installation, maybe until World War I or so, but it operated as a Confederate prisoner of war camp, Union prisoner of war camp for Confederate prisoners. It was called the Andersonville of the North. It wasn't they intended to abuse the prisoners, but most of the prisoners, the ones that were not officers, were just out in the open, and they had to fend for themselves, and it was very overcrowded, and thousands died from just diseases, just diseases that were passed around within this camp. So there's a story about, no, not a story, but this is true story, we'll say, okay, about some Confederate Jewish prisoners at this place called Fort Delaware. Probably the most vocal of them was a gentleman by the name of Max Newgas, who was from South Carolina, but originally from New York. And he was not a very enthusiastic Confederate. Actually, he deserted on the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg. And I guess he got through his own lines because he just looked like he knew where he was going. And so they let him go, even though he was walking in the wrong direction. He just walked through his lines, and he presented himself to pickets of the 21st New York Militia, said he wanted to surrender, said he was willing to take an oath of allegiance to the US, but they weren't buying it, and they treated him like any other prisoner, and they sent him to this Fort Delaware. So he started writing letters. He was a big letter writer, but there were others, along with him, who tried to appeal to whoever they could appeal to through various channels. And it said, I have this bit of a book called The Jewish Confederates by Robert M. Rosen that tells their story in a little more detail. And in his petition, he said that he was forced to serve. He was forced, according to the Conscription Act that was passed in April of 1862. But apparently he actually did enlist before that. The Confederates, the Jewish Confederates who were in the prison, appealed to Rabbi Weiss, who was a Reform rabbi in Cincinnati, Ohio, who was politically a Democrat, who they thought would be sympathetic. He did forward their request, but nothing happened with it. They just ended up having to serve their time. Any questions? Anybody have? You can raise hands if you're muted, or please ask questions if you have them. Now I have a little video here about the cemetery that was next to this Fort Delaware, this Union prison for prisoners of war. And of course, the 2,436 Confederate soldiers buried all died from disease.
Check.
We'll just run this video.
The sound is up.
It's called.
Here on the banks of the Delaware River in South Jersey is a cemetery with a story of the Civil War and a question for our present time on how America wrestles with what to do with Confederate monuments. This is a monument to the Confederacy, but it's not what you think. It's a grave marker for 2,436 Confederate soldiers who died at a nearby prison camp. They were captured during the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. Then they were taken to a prisoner of war camp on an island in the Delaware River, just off the New Jersey coastline. But the prisoner of war camp was so disease-ridden that many of these men died. After the Civil War ended in 1865, The U.S. government buried these soldiers here in a mass grave. Years later, the federal government erected this monument. This cemetery also contains the graves of Union soldiers who were prison guards and also died of diseases during the Civil War. As America ponders the question of how to remember the Civil War and what to do with its Confederate monuments, certainly this spot offers a nuanced perspective. But will that nuanced view here in New Jersey be heard now amid the debate that is roiling across America?
Okay. Ruth Ann, could you unmute people again? Or give them option to?
They have to do it themselves.
Oh, okay. Yeah, folks, if you have a question, please unmute and ask your question. I just want to make sure everybody can hear the clips okay and hear what I'm saying.
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay.
Hear you
And of
just
course-
fine, Steve.
Okay, that's great. Now this cemetery next to the prisoner of war camp, of course, I had a great interest in the Civil War at the time, and I schlepped Sunette and the kids unwillingly to see this place. And actually exchanged a few words with the caretaker of the cemetery. You know, he's a very nice guy. And so, And so just a few words about him. This is a little bit of a footnote to the story, but unfortunately, does everybody remember the a serial murderer by the name of Cunanan back in the 90s? Andrew Cunanan, who actually killed the prominent fashion designer Versace.
Oh, that's why the name is familiar.
Yeah. And he was just apparently this, Andrew Cunanan was just passing through, needed a truck, and very sadly killed this caretaker of the Confederate cemetery there. His name was William Reese. And, just a little footnote to the story here, because I remember being here at the cemetery and exchanging some words with him and, asking some questions. He was the sole caretaker at this place. Okay. Now this is another subject. It's lesser known to even Civil War buffs. Roberta has a question. Yeah, you're muted, Roberta. Roberta, could you unmute yourself?
No, I had heard about this.
Oh, okay.
The sentence that he stopped the illicit trade of Southern cotton run mostly by Jews and other unprincipled traders.
Yeah,
that includes Jews in the unprincipled traders.
Yeah. And
Steve,
if anybody, yes, go ahead. Yeah, I'm going to be speaking about this, but go ahead. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that in Chernow's book on Grant, there's a long, several pages dedicated to this particular incident. And not to really excuse, but to explain why this happened. And you'll go into detail what it was. Relationship with his father was very bizarre. Grant's father. His father was strange. No. And his father had dealt with some Jewish dry goods merchants who were they were bad people. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And Grant was just incensed that his father had gotten involved with these nasty people. And so kind of on not a whim, but, poor judgment, because he apologized for it later and was embarrassed, he came up with this order.
Yeah.
So there's some background here that doesn't necessarily, excuse him, but it explains it.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Thank you for adding that. But just quick to fill in people who may not have heard of this. Is anybody out there read the book Catch-22 or saw the movie Catch-22?
Oh, I saw the movie.
Okay, okay. There was a character there
Yeah.
in the movie. I loved that book. It was, I read it in high school. I thought it was the funniest book ever. There was a character named Lieutenant Milo Minderbinder.
I was wondering if you Milo Minderbinder could get anything for you.
Yeah. So this was a guy who saw World War II as a business, a profitable business, and actually, had all sorts of ridiculous deals going on. And one of them involved him getting a big load of Egyptian cotton that he couldn't get rid of, was trying to figure out how to get rid of it. And finally, he decided to go into a business deal. Yeah, bear with me.
It's Brazilian coffee.
Oh, okay, Brazilian coffee. I stand corrected. It was something like that. And
yeah, definitely. I love that book. Yeah.
So, whatever it was, he decided to go into business with the Nazis. And he contacted the Germans. And they said, yeah, we'll take it off your hands. All you have to do is bomb your own airstrip. And so he somehow he gets the pilots, he gives them shares in his company, and they all go up and they bomb the airstrip. But anyway, that was the kind of business that they were trying to shut down here. There was a very active black market trade across enemy lines with Confederate civilians who were providing cotton, which the South had plenty of, and to Union officers who were giving them all sorts of materials that the South needed, which was, aiding the enemy. It was a very, very bad thing. And it was decided, as Gail pointed out, that this was a Jewish business, even though it really was not. The Jews, there were Jews who were involved in this, but they were mostly non-Jews. However, in order to stop this illegal trade, Grant issued an order expelling Jews from the whole area of his control. And this was not done nicely. These people were just thrown out of their homes with nothing. They couldn't take their horses. They couldn't take their carriages. They had to leave on foot with nothing. Of course, there was a hue and cry that went up from this. There were many Jews in the Union Army and Jews who were Union supporters, and this was just awful. A delegation went to see Lincoln about it. And Lincoln, of course, was always a big kidder. So he said, I see the children of Abraham have been expelled from the land of Canaan. And the people who came to him said, yes, and we are coming to Father Abraham for help and salvation. And he did help them. He did help them. Among the people in this delegation was this very prominent Rabbi Weiss came, and later on he claimed, and I mentioned this in the part 1 that I did before, that Rabbi Weiss claimed that Lincoln thought that he had some Jewish heritage, but that hasn't repeated, that hasn't been, that quote hasn't shown up anyplace else. That was just, Rabbi Weiss's word that happened. I was wondering if maybe Lincoln was even kidding. But anyway, he countermanded that order.
Yes.
And in general, Lincoln was a good friend of the Jews. In addition to being a very good president, and of course, if you're interested in more about Lincoln's relationship with the Jews, I mentioned a very good book, American Jewry in the Civil War. by Bertram W. Korn. Has a lot about this. So, yeah, I'm going to ask Gail, do you have anything to add on?
No, just briefly, historical fact, 100 Jews were directly affected by this order, not thousands and thousands. It wasn't. Yeah.
Somebody's getting a phone call.
Me.
You? Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? No, okay. Now this is another, you know, and I'm going to apologize. This is another Confederate with kind of an interesting story. He was another one of these Sephardi families, and actually of his larger family, there were lots of people who served in the Confederate Army. Major Raphael Moses, and he was a supply officer. And actually, he appears briefly as a character in the movie of Gettysburg. I was very frustrated. I was looking for a clip. I just wanted to show something with somebody from the tribe in it, but it wasn't on the clips that I found on YouTube. But anyway, if you go back and you watch the movie, maybe you'll see, because he actually was a confidant of General Lee. He had a lot of conversations with General Lee. He was apparently a very personable person. People liked him. There was a character in the movie of Gettysburg. It was a British officer. I think his name was Fremont. And that is actually a real person who came to observe on behalf of the British government. He came to observe the Southern armies, you know, and report back on what was going on. And he, I remember a quote from him, this Fremont, who said that Major Raphael Moses was a delightful Hebrew, which I guess is the best compliment you could get in those days. Any comments? Any questions? Any hands? Okay. Here. And he actually carried out the very last order of the Confederate government, which was to distribute $40,000 among Confederate soldiers, who were weary, hungry, and shoeless. And he did that in spite of the great danger and being besieged by mobs who really wanted that money. And this is where he's buried. And this was a chance, you know, when you do things on the internet, you find things kind of by chance. So here's a gentleman whose name is Raphael J. Moses III. And I'm going to go way out on a limb and assume this is one of his descendants, who was a prominent lawyer. And I just found this, happened to find it just by Googling on the internet. Now, these are other members of the Moses clan, the Moses brothers of South Carolina, and I'm going to guess maybe distant relatives. I don't know, can't confirm that. The man who's standing did not survive the war. He was killed. And I think, yeah, one of the seated gentlemen was a commandant of a chapter of Confederate veterans. The other one was called Lord Shaftesbury. by his friends because of his scholarly style of writing. Now, this is something I don't know. I've told some of you I'm subscribed to a very interesting service called newspapers.com, which is a giant database of newspapers, some of which go back to the 1700s. And so I just happened to find this in a newspaper called The Jewish South, which came out for a few years at the end of the 1800s in Richmond. And this is sort of just a different, sort of interesting obituary to a gentleman named Mr. Marx Mitteldorfer, which you probably won't find him in any historic book, but he died actually fairly young, in his 50s, if you do the math. Had a stroke, then seemed to be doing better, went to some sort of entertainment, and was stricken with so-called apoplexy and died. He had been in the Confederate artillery. He professionally did decorating, had a decorating business, and one of his last contracts was doing the decorations for the occasion of a big Confederate reunion in Richmond. And his funeral was at the Hebrew Cemetery. I had some slides about it in the first part, where there was a section actually for Confederates, Jewish Confederates. His funeral, of course, was also attended by Confederate veterans. Are there any questions? Questions, comments? This is another little clipping I found.
Hey, Steve,
Through this, yes. Who's?
what are heptasophs?
I'm sorry.
There's a term, heptasophs.
Who's speaking?
Lenny,
Oh, Lenny, you're asking about a term?
it said heptasophs.
Heptasox. Let me go back. Previous. Where did you say heptasox? No, apoplexy. Are
No,
you looking at
it
this?
said B'nai B'rith. Some
Oh,
organization.
heptasophs. Heptasophs, right. Well, who are the heptasophs?
That's my question.
You have to Google it.
Okay.
Sorry. I don't know. It's probably some kind of fraternal organization, you know, like the Freemasons and the Odd Fellows and all those guys. You know, a Ben's Club of some sort. Next, you tell us when you find something. Heptasophs. Whoop.
It was a fraternal organization in New Orleans.
Okay, doesn't say too much about them.
Changed its name to the Standard Life Association in 1933.
It was founded in 1852.
Okay. So he probably belonged to a couple of different organizations, you know, clubs. And this is another clipping from the same newspaper. This is the Jewish South,
Steve,
1898. Yes,
I'm a little surprised. He was Jewish, correct?
yes. Yes, why are you
And
surprised?
and some Masons attended. Well, the Masons attended. Now, I always thought that they didn't allow Jews into the Masons back when. I'm sure that's not the case now.
Hmm.
But they were in attendance at this funeral, evidently.
Yeah, okay. So he was probably a Mason too?
Well, but that's what I'm asking.
I'm sorry?
Now, this is Ricky. I heard that when Jews settled and there wasn't enough to make a temple, to build a temple, that they frequently met at Messianic halls, that the Masons were very amenable to the Jewish immigrants.
Oh, okay.
And then heptatite, isn't HEPT the prefix for the number 7? So I'm wondering if 7 men started this little
Yeah,
club and they named
maybe.
after them.
Maybe it had something to do with the mysterious significance of the number 7 or something. You know, there
Yeah.
are all these you know, clubs were a little bit mystical and a little bit secret. You know, so
And
very
then
likely, yeah, very
Well,
likely.
it says,
Steve,
it says the organization was originally called the Seven Wise Men, and then it was formed by graduates of the earlier Mystical Seven or Rainbow Society, which was part of a popular college fraternities in the South. So
Okay.
that would explain that.
Well, I remember my you know, after Quint, Sept, Hept, Oct, you know, anyway, so I remembered the 7.
Well, you're probably a good Jeopardy player, Ricky.
No, I'm not fast enough on the bell.
Oh. Okay, very good. Nice going. Yeah. Well, I figured too. I didn't remember what number it was. I knew it was some number. Didn't know which one. But thank you. So that sort of fleshes it out a little bit.
Steve,
And of course, just talking about if I could just, oh yeah, go
can
ahead,
anybody
please.
hear me?
Yeah, who is speaking, please?
Roberta.
Oh, go ahead, Roberta.
Just because he had a Jewish name living in the South does not really mean he was Jewish.
He was buried in a
I
Jewish
discovered-
cemetery, though. He was buried in a
True.
Jewish cemetery.
True, because I lived in the South,
Yeah,
in Augusta, Georgia,
okay,
and in Fort Benning, which is the name of the town.
yeah.
And there were people who had Jewish names who were not Jewish. I remember a law firm, Cohen, and Cohen.
Okay.
And none of them were, my husband went to do something legal with them, picked them out because they were a Jewish law firm. And they looked at us bewildered when he made some remark about
Yeah.
he
Yeah,
was
but-
Jewish
okay,
and
but-
they were
but
Jewish.
Take a look at the last paragraph, though. There's your cue.
Yeah,
You know, it was the mortuary chapter of the Hebrew cemetery. It was also attended by B'nai B'rith.
yeah.
So I would assume he was. And it's sort of a German sounding. So there was a big German immigration in the middle of
You know, he might have been Jewish.
No, he
If
definitely
you
was
see my
Jewish.
gesture. But do you know what I mean? Very reformed Jewish. Extremely reformed.
Yeah. A lot. Well, in the South, they
Right,
were.
I know, I lived there.
Some of them were reformed, but some of them were these old Sephardi families, you know? And Sephardi really didn't have reform. They were, you know, Sephardi is really kind of just Orthodox, just the Ashkenazim who have, you know, reform and Orthodox conservative. Those are all streams within Ashkenazi, kind of.
Well, what I mean by saying reform, I meant
Not observant?
non-observant.
Yeah. Which would
Secular.
probably insult many
Secular Jews.
Yeah, reform doesn't mean non-observant necessarily.
I know.
Marilyn's got a
Well,
question.
that's why I corrected myself.
Oh, okay. Marilyn's got a question. Marilyn?
Okay, I was just going to say, the discussion about if he's Jewish or not, look where the article, the Jewish South. So obviously, he
Yeah.
had a
That's true too. Yeah. I think, yeah, with this it's not an article. That was the name of the newspaper that operated just for a few years. And it's one of the newspapers in this big database. I think I did my search based on newspapers that might have a lot of articles about Jewish people. So Jewish was kind of a search word, and this came up, you know, the Jewish South newspaper. So correct, Marilyn. Yeah, that's also a pretty heavy duty clue there. Now, here's another article from the Jewish South. It has a lot of articles. There's an article a little bit about Ahava. Beit Ahava was the name of the synagogue that goes back a long ways, which is a little bit of an unusual name for a synagogue. It's a house of love. And there's a class being held there for young ladies. Here is a little article about a service for Confederate dead held at the Hebrew Cemetery, okay? And under the auspices of the Hebrew Ladies Memorial Association. Apparently they had a little bit of a miscommunication, so not as many people showed up, but they had it, they had representation from the Confederate veterans. They had a little ceremony with some singing and some speeches, and they put flowers on the graves of the Confederate soldiers. And as you know, I mentioned in the first part, there were 30 Jewish Confederate dead who were buried there in that section. And other little bits and pieces here that are kind of interesting. People used to write a lot of things in newspapers, and just that they were visiting friends or visiting family. So all sorts of little bits about people visiting each other. There's death of somebody who had a clothing business.
I can't read the bottom, but it says something about whiskey.
This is for, oh, it's for straightening. It's a medicine for straightening kinky and curly hair.
Oh, I thought it said whiskey.
Which is obviously something you would advertise in a Jewish newspaper, right? A lot of people with curly hair. So next here. Now this, okay, this I just to reassure folks that I'm not a historical revisionist, this is a Jewish hero at Gettysburg, who was Jewish, a Union hero, okay, who actually, it was said that as he had 2 horses shot out from under him, according to the reports, and he calmly stood as the guns thundered and smoked his cigar in the face of the enemy as cannonballs were being fired all around with the sang-froid of a Saladin. Now, I'm sure he didn't get a congressional award for heroism just for smoking a cigar in the face of the enemy. He probably did more than that. And he was named after the war, he was named by then President U.S. Grant to be the 9th governor of the Washington Territory, which was then a territory. Of course, he was another German immigrant, had a German accent. So famously, while visiting Seattle once, he said, "Mein Gott, what a splendid soil for cabbages." Any questions? Okay. Now this is another Union gentleman who may have been one of the highest ranking Jewish officers in the U.S. Army during the Civil War. He served with Ohio Volunteer Infantry, became a staunch abolitionist. During his service, he wrote a lot of letters back home, and you can actually read his letters if you're interested in this. I know Gail is interested. You can read his compilation of his letters to his wife called My Dear Marcus, which is available. This is his grave. He died during the war. He was killed during the war. This is Marcus Spiegel was his name. Again, hopefully this will all get recorded so you can read the bits, pretty detailed bits here that I lifted, cut and pasted liberally from the internet. Another reason why this is not a work of scholarship, okay? That's not what scholars are supposed to do. It's called plagiarism. Oh. Okay. Any questions? Can we unmute everybody? Or voluntary unmute yourselves? Comments, questions, discussion?
Nice work, Steve.
Yeah.
It was very nice work, Steve. Really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Do you know what? Yeah, we have a little more time. Here, I could go back to some of this earlier stuff that I showed.
Steve,
Yes.
it seems like we spent an hour on the Confederacy plus a little bit today. And does that mean that there weren't as many prominent Jewish Northerners, or
No.
we have another
No.
week?
No, that just means that this wasn't a work of balanced scholarship. I was just
You just found those
I
Southerners.
found a bunch of interesting stories and I shared them.
Stephen,
Yes.
is there any chance you could do the life of Al Jolson sometime?
Do you know what? That's an interesting idea. I could definitely, I'll put that down. Yeah.
Great, I'd love to hear that.
Because, do you know what? I would have to research Al Jolson, but I hear that he wasn't as much of a mensch as Eddie Cantor was. That Eddie Cantor was just a personally very nice guy, and Al Jolson, I think, was not very nice. To a lot of the, talented people sometimes are like that. I guess he was a little demanding. Not too nice to his family too, I think.
Which would, of course, make him more interesting.
Yeah, that would make him interesting. Yeah. Same as yeah. Sorry, it was overbalanced with the Confederates here, but yeah, there were, because overall there were many more Jewish soldiers in the Union armies than the Confederate. And also, if you want more scholarship and more information, again, I'd refer you to the book, The American Jewry and the Civil War by Korn. Is an excellent book. He also has something I didn't go into here about the chaplaincy. Where there, you might ask, were there Jewish chaplains in the Civil War? And actually, there were. Except interestingly, the Confederate armies allowed Jews to be chaplains, and the Union Army did not. You had to be a Christian denomination, and it took an act of Congress to allow Jews to be chaplains in the Union Army. So that took a little bit of effort, which is interesting, just interesting. There were, when I recall, and again, I would have to check in the materials and in Korn's book, this is all stuff from Korn's book, but I think the Confederate Jewish chaplains, it was just sort of an informal position, and they weren't rabbis. They were just, well-informed. You could call them like lay rabbis.
I have a question.
One was a liquor salesman.
I have a question, Steve. Steve?
Yes, I can hear you, Marilyn. Yes,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Going back to when Grant made those people leave their homes
Yes.
and Lincoln interceded,
Yeah, Order
What-
11.
were they able to go back to their homes? Or were they resettled? Do you
No, my
know?
understanding was it was totally reversed, and that they were allowed, if they wanted to go back, they could go back.
Okay.
It wasn't in effect very long, actually. There was such an outcry. And again, Grant was always embarrassed about this afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
He was in the midst of this feud with his father and it involved these couple of, I'm trying to remember what their last name was. I think it was Marks or something. Anyway.
It cost him a few votes too.
I'll bet it did.
And,
Yep.
Grant was never anti-Semitic. He was never, Grant was never considered anti-Semitic, actually. So,
Except by the Jews who refused to vote for him afterwards.
well, there was still some people up, and they, rightfully so. It was
He did have
misjudgment
Jewish
on his
supporters.
part. And I'm not an apologist, but that's
Yeah, well, he had Jewish supporters. He had Jewish friends afterwards. His presidency wasn't very successful. It was a very corrupt administration in general.
well, because he was easily buffoon. Let's put it that way. He was very naive when it came to, because he was basically such an honest person himself. He never could understand how people, couldn't believe people were that dishonest. He was always kind of surprised, and he was taken financially many, many times by many people. In fact, that's why he wrote his autobiography at the end of the war. It was when he was dying of throat cancer, to support his wife, because a man had taken advantage of him and absolutely bankrupted him. So he's a very, very interesting person.
Steve?
That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Steve?
Oh, yes. Thank you, John.
You're welcome, Steve.
Steven?
Yes.
Just as a footnote, I wondered if you know anything about, I don't know if it was right after the war, but there was a band of men, they were probably about 70, they were called Quantrill Raiders.
Yes.
And they caused tremendous havoc. They killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
And they were a very vicious gang.
They were Confederates.
Oh, okay.
With no compulsion about killing prisoners of war. So they were, this was actually during the war,
During the war.
Yeah, and these were guys who would have probably been convicted of war crimes. That I did hear about. That's what I know about it. Gail might know something about him that she can add.
Not too much. No, afraid not.
Well, hopefully there weren't any Jews in that group.
Yeah, but probably were. Yeah. John Brown's band had at least one abolitionist Jew in it. John Brown, the initiator, tried to initiate a revolt of slaves, so he had a Jewish abolitionist among.
No, that would be an interesting subject, Steve, is to go into the abolitionists, Jewish abolitionists, because I'm sure there were quite a few. That might be an interesting subject to research.
Yeah. And the main, in the best resources is Book of Corn, I think, is probably just about the best overall. So, I'd recommend that to you, Gail, and anyone else who has, wants to delve into this.
Like I need another book, right?
Yeah. It first came out in 1951, and it's been, republished multiple times.
But I'm thinking about just the abolitionists. They don't even necessarily have to be Jewish, but very interesting organization.
Yeah, and I did recommend. I did mention in the part one the rabbi who was an outspoken abolitionist, Einhorn,
right.
who responded to the rabbi who was sort of wishy-washy about the whole issue of slavery and said he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's an idiot, Yeah. But he spoke up in Maryland, which was a border state, and so he barely got out without being tarred and feathered after he made his famous abolitionist speech.
I have to admit I'm a little biased when it comes to abolitionists. My hometown is Oberlin, which was part of the Underground Railroad and 9 miles from Lake Erie. So that was, was positioned very well for the abolitionists to hide. And some of my friends, when I was in high school, actually lived in houses in Oberlin that still had the hidey holes where they hid the slaves. They were making a run. Yep.
Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, we're
Oberlin-
recording all this, right? Yeah, this program is being recorded.
Yeah. There's a book out called Oberlin that started the Civil War. The town that started the Civil War.
Steve,
Yes.
just a point of information that people might be interested in. Going today to our legislature in Washington, there are 38 Jewish congressmen and 8 Jewish senators in attendance today.
Several of them are women.
Okay. All righty. That's good. That's good representation.
You left out the Supreme Court.
That's
Oh,
right.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
got one of them too. Yeah. Yeah.
Several.
More Catholics than Jews on the Supreme Court, though.
Well, I was thinking of Jewish and female is Ruth
Oh,
Bader
yeah.
Ginsburg. Yeah.
Fuckers, what are you doing, you crazy cat?
Well, thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure as always. Yeah, yeah. I'll have to come up with another subject. I'll think about what you suggested. Yeah.
Al Jolson.
Al Jolson. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, join us this afternoon and then tomorrow for Shabbat service with the Friedman brothers. Saturday's Torah studies. And, oh, for you guys, next Wednesday's movie is definitely not a chick flick. So, Sid and I watched it, or at least I watched it yesterday. So the Catcher is a Spy is definitely not a chick flick. So anybody who doesn't want chick flicks, tune in.
Did you get accused of choosing a chick flick in Golda?
No,
Oh.
no, I didn't. But I just letting.
Oh.
I'm just saying, I sent an email to Merle and Mike about the movie, and they said, "Oh, should we, have another one?" I said, "No, we might attract a different audience." So I'm just letting everybody know, because if Sid thinks it's a chick flick, he won't even turn in. So it's not, but it's interesting.
Ruth, you might do RBG. That's a good film. Excellent.
What's
Recommend.
RBG?
Ruth
Bader
Bader
Ginsburg.
Ginsburg.
Oh, yes.
The one, we have that in the library.
Yeah. I donated that.
Yeah, we
I
have
know
it.
you do. Yeah.
So
It's very good.
We
Really
could
good.
possibly show that.
Okay, I have to go. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, thank you, everybody. See you
Thank
later.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.